So now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome next speaker, Ms. Chen Hui Jing, the developer advocate from Nextmo Singapore.
Music is the answer.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is going to be very funny if the slides never come out. Anyway, Sawadee. I'm very happy to be here at JavaScript Bangkok, especially since I'm talking about CSS. But don't worry, I'm only going to be here for 25 minutes, so you please hear me out. So CSS, right? I've loved CSS ever since I first picked up web development. I mean, I like JavaScript also, but I love CSS more, right? And sometimes, you know, when you love something a lot, over time the feeling might fade. But not so with me and CSS. In fact, I'm even more excited about CSS now than when I first started. And let me explain why. Right? Because like every good relationship, both parties must evolve and grow. And CSS has evolved and grown a lot over the years since I first picked it up. I like to think that I also evolved and grown over the years, but that's another conversation. You know, we're not going to talk about that. So my name is Hui Jing, and today we're going to talk about CSS and how DevTools can help us understand CSS better. Because like recently I've been thinking more and more about how to show people who find CSS confusing, or maybe you find CSS frustrating, that's very common, or maybe you're just new to CSS and like, what is this, doesn't work. I've been thinking about how to show these people how much easier it is to do things now than before. And so a light bulb went off in my head last year when the Flexbox inspector was released in Firefox DevTools, because it showed me what the browser was doing to my items. I mean, I always use Grid Inspector when I'm building things with Grid. I always use the Grid Inspector to show me what the browser was doing to my Grid items. But the Flexbox Inspector really opened my eyes to the possibilities of what DevTools could be. So it's like having a CSS advocate, but inside your browser. So because of the limited time I have, I picked a few specific CSS properties to talk about today. So let's start with Flexbox. And hopefully this works because it's going to be me resizing the browser like this, I don't know, maybe 1,000 times. That's actually the subtitle at the top. That's a secret. But okay, so let's talk about Flexbox, right? So Flexbox, I feel that it can be confusing for most people because the end size of your box, right, is not entirely determined by you. No. The browser does things to your item. So Flexbox is the first layout model that establishes a parent-child relationship, meaning when you put display flex on an element, right, what happens is it establishes a formatting context for its direct children. So the size of your children is determined by 3 factors. It's determined by flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. And this is a mental model that's a bit hard to understand because it's not direct, right? Like last time when you say, my box 300 pixels, and you look, oh yeah, okay, my box is 300 pixels. Now sometimes you put a size of like 250 pixels, come out your box not 250 pixels. Like, wow, very confusing. So I think flex basis is this property that a lot of developers misunderstand. Because it's not the end size, it's the starting size. So if you can't remember anything about Flexbox today, just remember that flex basis is the starting point from which your browser calculates the size of your box. Which means, depending on the value of flex grow or flex shrink, your end size may not be what you put as the flex basis. Okay, so this is much easier to understand if the browser tells you what it's doing. So let's look at this. Okay, a bit small, zoom. So let's look at this. This is a container with display flex. So the 3 items inside, they are the flex children. So they are sized with Flexbox. So if I highlight this one, if there is no flex property on it, but the browser applies default styles. So if there is no flex property, the browser will give it a flex grow of 0, flex shrink of 1, and flex basis of auto. How do I know this? Because the browser will tell me. So if you go computed and then you click on browser styles, right, you can just search for flex. So it will tell you, okay, yeah, flex grow 0, flex shrink 1, and flex basis auto. So grow 0 means, right, if there's a lot of space, it's not going to grow. So we're talking about this particular item here, the last one, right? Got a lot of space, but 0, that's why it doesn't grow. But because the flex shrink is 1, right, when there's not enough space, the box will shrink. Okay, that's fine. And the last value, which is flex basis, is auto. So what does auto mean? Right, auto means that, and we can see this because there's the option now to have a flex overlay. So you turn it on, it will tell you what's going on. So because I said flex basis is the starting size of a flex item, right? When I say auto, it actually resolves to content size. So you can see this number is like 296. Fine. So that's how long this sentence is. So this is the starting size of the this particular box, right? So when there's a lot of space, it doesn't grow. So it's always. Oh wait, okay. The content changed because I got nothing better to do. Then I go and make the font size variable. Never mind. Let's make it fixed. Let's change it back to like 1.5 m. Yeah. Okay. Very nice. Okay. Layout. So it shouldn't change now. Yeah, so it's 328, doesn't change. But when there's not enough space, what's good about the inspector is now it starts to tell you that, oh, okay, because flex shrink is 1, this is like, pretend that this is the browser talking to you, right? So the browser is saying, okay, your original content size was this much, and then because your flex shrink is 1, the browser, I shrunk your box. I shrunk your box by 62.42. And so the end size in 266. I don't know about you lah. Like, before I saw these numbers, I don't understand. Like, browser, what are you doing to my item? Why my item the size so weird? But now that I see the numbers, I'm like, oh, that's what you did. Yeah. So this is the part where I think DevTools is very useful to help us visualize this concept, because flex is quite complicated, right? There are like 3 values, and then depending on the number you put, everything different. But when the browser when you see it like that, I think it's very easy to understand. Now the interesting thing about flex is that there are few, like flex basis makes your item behave quite differently. So auto is one way. So when you use flex basis auto, what it means is that, like I said, it uses the content size as the starting point. So if we go and look at the other two, this particular item, there is no grow. The other two, right, the grow value is different. So this one is a flex grow of 1, and this one is a flex grow of 2. What Flexbox does is, it distributes free space. And what does free space mean? Free space, right, is the amount of space in the container after your content is distributed. When you put flex basis auto, the content counts. What do you mean? So when I highlight this, the starting size is the content. And so if you look, the starting size is different, but the amount of growth is related to the flex growth. So you see here, this is 94. Let's say 95, round up, okay? For here, it's about 190. Because the growth factor for the second one is 2, growth factor for the first one is 1. So it grew, the free space is distributed 2 to 1. Free space. But the final size is not 2 to 1. If you wanted the final size of your item to be 2:1, right, you cannot use auto. You must use 0. So let's look at this second example. Ayo. In this second example, right, it's set to grow 1, but the basis is 0. All of them, the basis is 0. So what do you mean when the basis is 0? If you go to layout, right, a browser will tell you, content size 0, meaning the browser doesn't count the content size anymore. It just distributes the space according to the flex grow and shrink factor. So I'm trying to get 400, but this is very hard, cannot. Okay, 400. Pretend it's 400, okay? So if you look at this, if you want this type, you want the one box to be twice of another, then you can use flex 0. Because now the first box is 400, the second box is 800. Because when you set the basis to 0, it ignores the content size, and all the space is considered free space to distribute. So that's how flex basis kind of works. The interesting thing about flex is that, one more thing I want to highlight, is that when there is no width and no flex basis is auto. So it takes content size. But let's say you put a width. If you put a width onto the, oh, I cannot spell width. If you put a width onto your element, the width becomes the starting size, right? And you can see it if you go there, Flexbox, oh, okay, your starting size 200. Okay, I calculate 200. If you have a width, and then you have a flex basis, then flex basis win. So it will ignore the width, and it will use 300. So this might be hard to understand without the flex inspector, but with the flex inspector, at least you can go and check, like, hey, what did the browser use to start with? And I think this is a pretty useful tool that the browser now gives us that lets us understand this type of more complicated CSS properties. So the next property I want to highlight, right, is part of CSS Grid. CSS Grid very complicated. So I'm going to choose, like, this is like one of my more favorite property. It's called grid template areas. So I'm not sure how many of you actually use grid already. Even if you never used grid before, never mind. It's not the basics of grid, not that hard to understand. But what we have here is, again, you can also toggle the overlay. Okay, nothing else, right? Take this out. So if you go to layout, right, you can toggle, like, if you have multiple grids, you can toggle, and you can change the color, whatever, but like purple quite nice. So other than that, right, you have options. You can either display line number or display area names. So most typically you want to see the line numbers, because, like, even this grid is not that big, right? It's 6 by 6. It's already a bit, like, it's a bit, I would say, annoying. If I want to count, I'm like, oh, I want to put it here, then you're like, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you have the line numbers, you can just straight away say, oh yeah, I want to put it here. But sometimes, right, especially if you have a much bigger grid and it's like a full page layout and you have a lot of elements on it, like say you've got 20 elements, right? If you want to change the position of any of the elements, or like when you change breakpoint and then you want to rearrange the whole page, right? If you want to go one by one and go and change the grid item position, it's like, cannot lah, right? It's a waste of time, right? Then like you got like work-life balance, and then so yeah, if you do this all the time, then your work and your life no more balance. So this can actually save you time because you can assign specific areas specific names. So the code looks a bit like this. It looks a bit complicated because the DevTools just squish everything together. But what you can do is it allows me, now I display the area names, right? I can assign specific sections with specific names. And then I can tell the child to go to the area and stay there. So for example, this elephant emoji is in the area called elephant. So the rest of them all have their own names, right? But if I ever want to change the position, right, I don't have to look at the children ever again. So now I only got 3 children. If I got 20 children, I can also ignore all the 20 children. And for example, if I want to change, I say, oh, okay, elephant actually don't need 4 squares, 2 squares can already. I can just change the code. So a dot means like empty space like that. So I can just change the code directly on the grid, on the container code. So let's say you have like 5 breakpoints because you're responsive. So you don't have to go and write media query for each of your individual 20 items. You can just do all your media queries on your grid container itself. So it also makes it easier to maintain. And the fun part about template areas is that if you like elephant is a lot of letters, like, and you don't like having many letters, don't worry, you can also use emoji. So if you change this to, like, maybe you love elephant, then you use a heart, also can. So it's a very easy way to label your grid areas, and it's a much easier way to manage, I feel, manage your grid items for a more like big and complicated layout. So this grid template areas, if you never tried it before and you are using grid, right, I suggest that you just try it out. Maybe it might be good for you. Another property that I want to talk about that I think even less people have used, maybe you heard of it, is this thing called Subgrid. So I think there are quite a lot of articles. They always say, oh yeah, Grid is amazing. Grid came out 2017. It changed the world. Okay, but that doesn't mean that it was perfect when it first came out. Because when it first came out, what you couldn't do is that the grid only affects its direct children. If we have content inside the children, you cannot get the content to line up with each other because it's a one level only. So what grid introduced is it allows the nested grids, meaning if like your grid, right, then your grid got children, then the children got children become grid got grandchildren, then your grandchildren got children got great-grandchildren. Yeah, all these children, right, they can line up with each other. So it's easier to see example again. So if you use, again, it's easier to see when you get to highlight, right? So once you have a grid, inside I have two grid items, so they are grid children. But they can also have their own grid, which lines up with the parent. Okay, why is everything the same color? Hang on. We can change color, because everything same color, very hard to see. Orange, blue, green. Okay, fine. Yeah, so as you can see, if you look at just the markup, right, this one is the big grid, like a grandfather grid. So each of the grid items, they have their own children. So A, B, C, D is grandchildren, 1, 2, 3, also grandchildren. So what you can do is that subgrid, right, is not a display property, it's a sizing property. So for your nested grid, you still use display grid. It's in the grid template rows and columns, then you use the keyword subgrid. So when you use the keyword subgrid, what you're doing is you are telling the browser that I want the grandchildren to also follow the parent grid. So in this example, I can let the items B and C align with item 1 and 2, even though they are separate grids, because they are part of a bigger grid. But you don't have to like follow everything. So you can only follow on either the columns or the rows or both. So if you look at the, just look at the shading, right, you can see that they have their own row sizes. The row size for the blue grid and the red grid, they are different. It's only the column size that is the same, because I have set the column size to subgrid. So that's pretty much how it works. And using the DevTools, right, you can also see that the subgrids themselves have their own set of line numbers. So let's say I want to place item 2. I will not use 4, I will use 2, because that's what its own set of line numbers is. So this is how DevTools can actually help us better visualize what's going on when we are, especially when we are doing layout, right? And the last property that I wanna talk about today is it's called CSS shapes. And CSS shapes has been around for a while, but I guess I don't see it that often. Cause like a few years ago, I used to work for an advertising agency, and my designers would always give me, advertising agencies or like that type of print publication, like fashion magazines, right? They always have this model, and the model almost always I'll stand like that. And then the text will flow around the elbow. But when my designer said, hey, can do like, yeah, can we do this spread on the web? And then I look at you and like, no. Because everything on the web, you must understand, everything on the web is a box. Everything on the web is a rectangle. There's no such thing as shapes. But there is this property called CSS shapes that let us do this kind of thing. So this is creating a picture of a star, but I can let my text flow around the star. So the property that makes this work is called CSS shapes. So oh my god, why am I doing this? Yeah, sorry. So let's look at it and see how it works. So in order to make the shape, in order to make the text flow around the shape, we actually use this property called shape outside. For now, shape outside only works on floated elements. So cannot be helped, you have to float it. But what you can do is that you can use, there are a number of basic shape functions inside CSS. So there is like circle, there's ellipse, and then there's also polygon. So circle is just circle, so not very exciting. So I highlight polygon, because polygon is just points, it's just coordinates. So meaning, you can actually plot. You can plot, so this star is plotted, and you can change the value, and you can see how the text will move around. So why I want to highlight this is that there's a second property here called clip path. So the difference is shape outside will affect the shape that your text flows. Now, if I wanted to change the shape, so if I don't have clip path, right, like again, everything on the web is a rectangle. So without clip path, it's just a rectangle. But if I want to make it a star, I have to clip away the areas that I don't want. So because they are using the same value, which is this polygon function, let's say I make this star, like I've created a very abstract version of a star. What I can do is I can copy this same property, because when you edit directly here, the DevTools will change the value for you, which is great. It's very helpful. Because what I can do is you can either copy and paste this and put in your code, or you can copy and paste, put inside clip path, and then your text will match it. So this is, again, I find something that DevTools can help us understand how these properties work. Because like if I didn't see this one, I'll be trying to change the shape outside, and then I'm like, how come the text moved but my shape never moved? Because wrong property. See? So this is how I feel that DevTools can be very useful, not just to help us debug, but to also like teach us how CSS works. So I think time quite good. So let's see this demo. Let's hope this demo works, because I work for this company called Nexmo, and Nexmo does communications API. So I kind of have to talk about this a little bit. This is recorded, huh? Oh shit, maybe I get fired. Then I'm looking for a job. Just kidding. Anyway, so if let's say you want to build a layout like this, I tried to use like the properties that I talked about in the example. So if you want to build something like this, so I don't know how many of you actually played this game before. If you have a Nintendo Switch or 3DS, you know. If you don't know, then never mind. It's actually very fun. You can go and Google. It's called Okami. But a layout like this, for example, right, where you want to do this left, right thing. If I highlight the markup, right, in the past, how we do this is we will have to either change the order of the markup, or then you do this like float left, float right nonsense. But your markup, if you wanted the image and the text to flip alternately, you couldn't use the same markup. But with the property, for this one I use Flexbox. With Flexbox, you can keep the order of the markup. So if you look, it's a header, image, text. Even for the next one, it's still header, image, text. So this is what the newer properties allow us to do. It actually can help us maintain a more semantic markup. That's one of the things. Let's say, okay, let's hope this works, man. If not, this is like fail. So help, I'm hungry. So this type of interface, right? Let's go and look at agent. Yeah. Usually this type of chat interface, your new messages always start at the bottom, right? So I think in the past, you probably, without Flexbox, let's say, you probably needed to use JavaScript to do it, because you need to calculate the height of your window, and then you have to set your position accordingly. This layout, right, doesn't need any JavaScript. It's just Flexbox. So if I respond like, too bad, no more food. Like the new messages can be pushed to the bottom using Flexbox. So that's something that we couldn't do before, but we can do now. I need to plug this so that I can keep my job. So yeah, anyway, if you are interested in doing this kind of thing, or you want to like send SMS, you can use this coupon code, and for like $20 of credit, I think. Yeah, oh my god, I'm terrible at my job. Anyway, moving on. So like, okay, let's look at the other interface, right? So this is like a live chat, and it come out. But let's say you are on the agent side, you are building admin dashboard, right? When there's not enough content, but you still want like this input, I want it to be all the way at the bottom. Last time how I would do it is I have to go and calculate, I have to fix the height of the header, and then fix the height of the input, and then I like calculate 100%, then minus the height, minus this. Now you don't have to do this complete, because that's actually very fragile. Like if suddenly one day I decide to change or like I have extra words, or my header become wider, right? then cannot already. It won't stick to the bottom nicely. But again, using Flexbox, right, I can do something like this quite easily because what I do is I just make the chat area grow. And so these are things that we couldn't do before, but we can do now. And like personally, right, I feel that there's a lot more that DevTools can do to help us understand CSS. There's a newer CSS properties, like, you know, logical properties, or if you're doing something like this, like I like to do this mixed writing mode thing, it's a bit hard to visualize. DevTools can help us like figure it out. So my wish is actually for more people to just try out these new properties. Like, you don't have to use all of them, but just know that there are a lot more possibilities in your toolbox now. And I really hope that DevTools can help you figure out things just like it helped me figure out things. Thank you.
Thank you very much Miss Chen โอ้โหได้เทคนิคดีๆเพียบเลยนะคะ